Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Navigating Trump Accounts, What You Need to Know. My name is Gus Dodge. I work with Strategic Retirement Partners. I'm a wealth advisor here as well as a participant educator. And today I'm joined by my colleague, Savannah. I am honored to be speaking with all of you today and appreciate you joining us for this special event. Just a few quick notes before we get started today. All lines are muted. However, we do welcome your questions. If you have one, please get out your phone and scan the QR code that you see on the presentation slides. That will take you to an online form where you may submit your questions or schedule a consultation with one of our team members. Savannah and I will both be monitoring your questions, and we'll also try to get to as many as possible during our time here together today. Just to note, this session is being recorded, and we are going to share the recording with all of you who registered for the webinar later this week. We now invite you to scan the QR code that you see on your screen with your personal device. This is going to bring you to the form which I mentioned that you can submit any questions you may have throughout the entirety of this presentation. The same QR code will also be available on the bottom left-hand corner of each presentation slide. Savannah and I, again, will both try our best to get to everyone's questions today. I'm now going to hand it off to Savannah, who's going to get us started.
Thanks, Gus. My name is Savannah Wofford. I'm a financial advisor here with Strategic Retirement Partners. Let's begin today by laying the foundation for what Trump accounts are, how they work, and why they have become such an important conversation for parents or guardians before we get into the more detailed features and planning strategies a little bit later. First and foremost, we want to take a closer look at what a Trump account is and how it works. A Trump account is a tax advantage investment account specifically designed for children. You can think of it as a long-term savings vehicle with the goal of helping kids build wealth early in life. What makes these accounts unique is they are sponsored by the U.S. government, giving families a new way to invest for their child's future. The funds inside a Trump account are invested in the U.S. stock market, typically through options like mutual funds or ETFs. So instead of sitting in cash and earning minimal interest, we put the money to work in investments that historically have delivered stronger long-term returns. Now, it's important to note that these accounts generally cannot be touched before the child turns 18. So keep that in mind. This ensures that the money truly has time to grow. And then once that child reaches the age 18, the account will automatically convert into an individual retirement account, otherwise known as an IRA, in their name. That term may be familiar to you, and we're going to talk about some strategies later about how to utilize this IRA as a young adult. But at that point, once it's in the IRA, they can begin using it or continuing to grow the funds how they see fit under normal IRA rules. Now, overall, the purpose of a Trump account is simple. It is to provide long-term financial stability by giving our children a strong financial foundation early in life. For many families, this can become a powerful tool for generational planning and early financial literacy, which we'll talk about in just a few moments. So that's what a Trump account is, which is pretty straightforward. So we're going to go into who is eligible for this type of account, because this is going to be extremely important for families that are planning ahead. First and foremost, all children under the age of 18 with a Social Security number are eligible for a Trump account. Now, this account must be opened by a parent or legal guardian who claims their child as a dependent on their federal taxes. It just is a way for the government to help verify the familial relationship and eligibility. Now, one of the most exciting components of the Trump account is the government-funded contribution. This applies to children who are born between January 1st of 2025 and December 31st of 2028. Those children will qualify for a $1,000 seed contribution from the U.S. Treasury. This is automatic for all eligible children once the account is open, and it's really just meant to give them a meaningful head start in their investment journey. It's also worth noting that this program doesn't officially open until July 5th of 2026. Now, there's action you can take before then. We'll talk about that momentarily. The accounts will open July 5th, 2026. That's the date where families will have the ability to start making contributions. So if you have children who qualify, or maybe you know some families who do, now's the time to start planning. You can begin that account opening process now when filing your 2025 tax return, or you can wait until mid-year once contributions are set to begin on July 5th. So overall, eligibility is intentionally straightforward because the goal is to ensure that as many children as possible have access to a structured long-term investment opportunity that grows with them into adulthood, just like I'm sure most of us, probably wish we had the opportunity for as well. All right. Now you know what the account is, who is eligible. We want to look deeper into some of the biggest advantages that make those Trump accounts especially powerful for long-term planning. One of the greatest gifts that we can give the next generation is the confidence and the knowledge to understand how money works. Financial literacy isn't just about knowing how to save or balance a budget. It's about being able to make thoughtful, informed decisions that support long-term stability and opportunity. When kids grow up understanding concepts like compounding, risk and reward, and long-term planning, they're far more likely to make choices that set them up for financial security later in life. And this is where early investing becomes so transformative. When children start investing at a young age, even in small amounts, they gain access to something incredibly powerful, which is time. Time is the single biggest factor in growing wealth because the earlier you begin, the longer your money has to compound. And I speak with individuals all across the country at all ages, and I hear the same feedback over and over again as I wish I would have started earlier, or I wish I would have done something different. So this is really the opportunity to set your children up for success at the very beginning. Now, on top of all that, early investing really helps establish positive habits. It teaches your children to think about their future goals like education, a first home, maybe even retirement, rather than just satisfying their immediate wants for instant gratification. It's building confidence in managing money and reducing that fear or uncertainty that many of us feel when they start investing later in life. So when we talk about the Trump accounts, it's not just about the dollars in the account. It's really about instilling a mindset, and it's about teaching young people that investing isn't just for the wealthy, it truly is for everyone. So the sooner they start learning, the sooner they can take advantage of that compounding growth and making financial decisions from a position of understanding rather than guesswork. Now, as mentioned earlier, the account converts into an IRA, or an individual retirement account, once that child turns 18, to continue the potential for tax deferred growth. Okay. Now, at that point, your now young adult has the option to do what's called a Roth conversion. A Roth conversion is simply the process of moving money from a traditional tax deferred IRA into a Roth IRA where it can then grow tax free for the rest of their life. With a traditional IRA, you eventually pay that income tax when you withdraw the money. But with a Roth IRA, once that conversion is done and the taxes are taken care of up front, all that future growth and all future withdrawals decades from now can be completely tax-free if the rules are followed. Now, here's why that matters so much for someone who starts out with a Trump account. Most 18-year-olds have little to no taxable income. And because the taxes owed on a Roth conversion are based on your income level, a young adult with very low income is often able to convert the account at a very low tax cost, sometimes even close to zero. So once that conversion is complete, the clock starts on potentially 60 to 70 years of tax-free compounding. So let that sink in for a minute. That's decades of market growth with no future tax bill attached, and that's incredibly powerful. So when we think about that Trump account as a long-term wealth building tool, the Roth conversion opportunity is one of the major reasons these accounts can make such a meaningful difference for your child's financial future. And I'm going to hand it off to Gus. Can you tell us more about the potential for market growth?
Absolutely. Thank you, Savannah. Now I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the S&P 500, which is considered an eligible investment by the IRS. We are going to touch on a little bit more about what eligible investments really mean later on in this presentation. But the S&P 500 is widely used as a benchmark for the overall U.S. domestic stock market. Now, if we look at long-term data, the key takeaway is really consistency over time and not necessarily perfection. Historically, the S&P 500 has delivered an average annual return of about 13% the last decade. That's roughly 10% after inflation. Over the last 20 years, that's an over 400% appreciation. So you can see that the S&P 500 has really withstood the test of time. Even after major events like recessions, financial crises, or geopolitical shocks, the S&P 500 has eventually recovered and gone on to reach even new highs. Just $5,000 invested annually for 18 years using the historical index returns, the estimated account balance is over $300,000. Just imagine your child is a senior in high school and already has an investment account worth over $250,000. So when we look at, this historical performance, the lesson here isn't that the market always goes up in a straight line, right? But that over the long run, through disciplined long-term investing, this is where we have really seen the best reward. We are now going to illustrate, just how powerful long-term consistent investing can be inside of a Trump account. Even with the modest starting point, time and compound growth can create a truly remarkable outcome. Let's begin with the most simple scenario, right? Say a child receives that $1,000 initial government contribution, like Savannah mentioned, and nothing more is ever added. If that money grows at an inflation-adjusted rate of 8%, by the time that child reaches the age of 65, that account could grow to more than $149,000. That's the real power of compound interest, is letting your money grow uninterrupted over a long period of time. One of my favorite quotes is from Albert Einstein. He said, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world, right? But the impact becomes even more dramatic with small, ongoing contributions. If the family contributes an additional $5,000 or $500 each year consistently for those 65 years, just $500 a year, and the account earns that same 8% inflation-adjusted rate of return, the final balance could exceed that of $1 million. This is a powerful example of how steady, disciplined investing over decades can really transform relatively small annual amounts into substantial long-term wealth. So the message here is kind of simple. Trump accounts are designed to give children a financial head start, and the earlier the account is funded and allowed to grow, the bigger the impact. Even modest contributions, when paired with time and market growth, can really position a child for a much stronger financial future. That's why these accounts are being viewed as a major opportunity, what some have called a quote unquote gold rush for a children's future. The combination of early contributions and long-term growth potential can really lay a foundation for financial independence that lasts well into adulthood. Now we're going to focus a little bit on, the most important components of the Trump account program, and that is, how the money is actually invested. Like I mentioned before, I mentioned eligible investments. So during the growth period, Trump accounts are required to follow very specific investment rules. Funds can only be placed into what the IRS deems as quote unquote eligible investments. So you may be asking yourself, well, what is an eligible investment? Well, an eligible investment is generally a mutual fund or exchange traded fund, aka ETF, that tracks a broad index made up of primarily US companies. A common example would be an index fund that mirrors that of the S&P 500, which represents many of the largest companies in the country, like I mentioned before. These are type of investments that are chosen because they have a long history of stability, transparency, and long-term performance. Now, there are obviously some guardrails built in for protection. Eligible investments cannot use leverage, which means the funds that you are investing in can't borrow money to amplify returns. This helps reduce the amount of risk and ensures that the account remains focused on steady long-term growth rather than short-term speculation. Another rule is that the fund must have an annual fee of no more than 0.1% or 10 basis points. That is extremely low compared to many investment products on the market today. Low fees help maximize the amount of the account's growth that stays in the child's pocket over time. It's also very important to note that, no part of the Trump account may be invested in anything outside of these eligible options, like I just mentioned. Families won't be choosing individual stocks or cryptocurrencies or high-risk specialty funds. The program is intentionally designed to keep things simple, consistent, and aligned with long-term growth. So the big takeaway is that, Trump accounts are built on a low-fee, broadly diversified U.S. stock index fund. These restrictions can really help every child's account that's invested responsibly and positioned for steady long-term financial growth.
Thanks, Gus. Now that we've explored the advantages and long-term potential of these accounts, let's shift gears and talk about something just as important, and that's really deciding whether a Trump account is the right fit for your family. So let's take a moment and compare Trump accounts with one of the most common savings vehicles that parents use today, and that is a 529 plan. Both can be incredibly valuable tools, but they serve very different purposes, and understanding those differences can help families choose the option that best aligns with their goals. So let's start with the primary purpose. With Trump accounts, they're designed for long-term wealth building, functioning much like an IRA for your children. They're meant to support a wide range of future needs, whether that's retirement, it could potentially be education, it could be a first home, maybe even starting a new business. In contrast, 529 plans are specifically built to pay for education expenses. They offer great benefits, but they're more limited in how those funds can be used. One of the standout features of the Trump account is the $1,000 government seed contribution for qualifying children. This is free money that's intended to give kids a strong financial start, where on the other hand, 529 plans don't offer that government funded seed money. When you're looking at the contribution limits between the two, those Trump accounts do have a cap of $5,000 per year, and that is for the combination of personal and employer contributions that could be made to this account. 529 plans, however, allow for a much higher contribution level, and most of that's really constrained by your gift tax rules. So for families who want to save aggressively for college, a 529 may offer more flexibility, but there are a few differences there. Now, tax treatment is going to be a big difference between all the accounts that we might mention today. So when we look at those Trump accounts, those grow tax deferred, and those withdrawals later in life are taxed as ordinary income. Whereas 529 plans, the growth is completely tax-free when the money is used for qualified education expenses. Now, there are some other options with 529 plans as well, and we can get into those later. Now, the tax advantage can be very meaningful for college-bound students in that 529 plan, so it is worth exploring. When it comes to the investment options, Trump accounts are limited to that broad U.S. stock index, like Gus just explained to us. So this really keeps things simple and transparent, but also your options are much more narrow. Whereas the 529 plans offer a wider range of portfolios, including some age-based tracks that automatically adjust as your children get older. So the use of the funds in either account, there are, major differences there. Something that's, of course, also worth noting are some of the state tax benefits. They're not available in the Trump accounts, but could potentially be some state tax deductions in your 529 plan, depending on which state that you live in and which state's 529 plan that you invest in. So it may be worth exploring for you. So when you're really thinking about which one makes the most sense, should I have a Trump account or a 529 plan? It comes down to, what do you want the savings to accomplish? So a Trump account is designed to support your child as they step into adulthood, giving them flexible funds they can use for a wide range of early life milestones. And whereas the 529 plan, on the other hand, is built for a much narrower purpose, and that is really for education. If you know that college or vocational training is the central goal, then that 529 plan gives the ability to save more aggressively while also receiving some tax advantages specifically tied to schooling costs. So the choice ultimately depends on your priorities. If you want your child to have a versatile financial tool at age 18, the Trump account may be a better fit. But if your focus is purely on covering future education expenses as efficiently as possible, the 529 plan is often the stronger option there. So each has a clear purpose, and understanding that purpose is key to choosing the right path for your family, even if it's the combination of the two accounts. Guess I'm gonna hand it back over to you.
Yep. Now that we've kind of gone over, the basics of what a Trump account is, now we're actually going to walk through exactly what it takes to open a Trump account, and the process is actually kind of straightforward. So to begin, the IRS requires parents or guardians to complete Form 45, 47. Now, these numbers may seem a bit familiar to you as President Trump was indeed our 45th and 47th President of the United States. So Form 45, 47 is the official Trump account election form. This is the document that formally establishes the account for your child. When filling it out, you'll provide, basic identifying information like your name, social security number, address, along with the same details for your child since they will be the account's beneficiary. The form is also going to make you choose an important decision. Whether you want to receive that $1,000 government-funded seed contribution that Savannah had mentioned from earlier. Now, this is only available for qualifying children born between January 1st, 2025 and December 31st, 2028. So families with eligible children will want to pay special attention to this section. Electing to take the seed contribution ensures that the account is automatically funded with the initial boost once it is actually opened. So after completing this form, you simply follow the submission instructions provided to you by the IRS. Once processed, the Trump account will be created and ready to receive contributions once the program officially opens. The big takeaway here is that setting up the account is not necessarily complicated. The IRS has provided a single standardized form. As long as the parents have their basic information and their child's information on hand, the process should be smooth and relatively quick. The step is the gateway to unlocking the long-term benefits that we've been discussing throughout this entire presentation. It positions families to take full advantage of both the $1,000 seed contribution as well as the long-term growth potential built into the Trump account structure. Also to note, you can fill out this form and submit it to the IRS when you file your taxes for the 2025 tax year this April. Now we're going to talk a little bit about, how contributions actually work within a Trump account, because this is one of the areas where families have the most flexibility, and this is, probably the most frequently asked questions that we're going to get. So there are 5 different types of contributions that can be made to a Trump account. The first is the initial government-funded seed contribution of $1,000, like we've mentioned. This is automatically available for qualifying children and provides an immediate boost to the account before any additional deposits are made to the account. Second, contributions can be made by the account beneficiary themselves or the child, parents, or really any other person who wants to support the child's long-term financial growth. This could be, grandparents, relatives, or even friends. The third here are qualified general contributions, which come from larger entities such as state governments or federal governments. This is not necessarily limited in the amount as they are designed to support long-term wealth building initiatives. So there is no contribution limit. The fourth one, our employers can also contribute, which is really cool. This may be especially valuable for families where workplace programs or benefit packages include contributions to a Trump account as part of their financial wellness offerings. As of now, the limit for employer contributions is just $2,500 a year. This is not included in the employee's annual income as well, also to note. And finally, the fifth category of contributions are qualified rollover contributions. These allow funds from other account types to be transferred into the Trump account, giving families more flexibility in consolidated savings. There is, one important rule to keep in mind, which is timing. No contributions of any kind can be made before July 4th, 2026. That date marks the official opening of the program for deposits. Another key distinction is the annual contribution limits. Pilot program contributions, the qualified general contributions, and the rollover contributions, like we talked about, do not have any annual cap. However, personal contributions and employer contributions together have a combined limit of $5,000 per year. So let's say your employer contributes $2,000 to the Trump account, your personal contributions are now limited to $3,000 for that year. Now, this helps maintain fairness across households while still offering meaningful flexibility. So the bottom line is that, Trump accounts offer multiple pathways to fund a child's long-term financial foundation, whether that's contributions coming from the government, the family, an employer, or rollovers. The goal is pretty much all the same, maximizing that growth potential during the early years and positioning your child for a very strong financial future.
Thank you, Gus. So the purpose of today's webinar has been to give you clarity and confidence, whether you're preparing for education costs, maybe you're helping your child build a financial foundation into early adulthood, or thinking about some long-term wealth strategies. And understanding how these tools are all put together really just helps you be in a stronger position to plan ahead. So if you'd like to learn more on these topics in greater detail, there are some resources available for you, which are an excellent place to start. You can go to trumpaccounts.gov, or you can go to the IRS website, depending on what you're looking for. The Trump account website is straightforward, easy to follow guidance, whereas the IRS website dives a little bit deeper into some of those IRS regulations. So of course, we would love to open the floor for questions, and you can submit them using the QR code in the corner of your screen, and we'll work through as many as we can. So thank you for joining us today, and let's jump into the Q&A, which we do have a few questions for. Gus, do you mind stopping and resharing your screen because it looks frozen?
My screen is frozen.
Yes.
Still frozen?
Yes, it's okay. All right, so let's start with the first question that we had come through, and someone asked, what is the difference between the Trump account, an UTMA, and a 529 plan? And then the second piece to that was, I already have a 529 and an UTMA for my child, so would it be worth opening a Trump account as well? This is a great question. We talked about the Trump accounts versus the 529 plan. So I think it's worth spending a little bit more time on what's the difference between a Trump account and an UTMA. For those of you that aren't familiar with an UTMA, it's a Uniform Transfer to Minors Act. That's what the acronym stands for. And those accounts work like traditional non-qualified taxable brokerage accounts that you are the custodian of. So once your child reaches the age of majority, depending on which state that you live in, that's either 18 or 21, it transfers to their name. Okay. So the difference between the Trump account and the UTMA is that Trump account rolls into an IRA, which you're already likely familiar with. So when you're looking at the two, the UTMA is subject to capital gains tax treatment and possibly kiddie tax treatment, whereas the IRA will be have tax deferred growth. So when they take the money out, there is they pay income taxes on it. If it's before a certain age and it doesn't meet some of the qualifications, then there could potentially be a tax penalty there. With the UTMA, you are going to have more flexible investment options, whereas the perfect, thank you. Whereas the Trump account is U.S. index based only, and as there's no contribution limit with the UTMA, but there is a contribution limit for the Trump account. So if you're looking at the three of these, there is a possibility that you'll have maybe one of each. It depends on what the purpose is, right? So if you want to get them started with, maybe retirement savings, and that's the goal, then you could, open a Trump account and fund it. You could stick with the UTMA, and then of course you have that 529 plan. So, I mean, really it depends on what your order prioritization is, and then go from there. All right. So let me see, the next question. How will the money in the IRA impact educational assistance for college? So for this one, IRA assets do not affect financial aid eligibility. if they remain in the account. But let's say you withdraw some money from that account and it counts as income, it could increase your it's called your EFC, I believe, the expected family contribution 2 years later, which could affect or potentially reduce financial aid eligibility. So you want to take a look at that and make sure that maybe speak with your accountant and figure out how that works with FAFSA and other financial aids. Let's see. Okay, we had quite a few roll in. Okay, so we had a question about the Trump account for my granddaughter that was born last December. Can her parents open it? Do they have to open it, or can I open it as her grandfather? As a grandfather, you can open the account, submit the application. What's going to happen is if, let's say, you submit it and the parents submit it, they're going to go in order of kind of have an order of operations. So they would likely open the account through the parent first and foremost. But if you're the only one submitting that application and they can verify familial relationship and eligibility, then it is possible that you could be the keeper and the owner of that account. Who holds the account? So who holds the account is going to be, I don't know if you said a broker like Fidelity. So yes, of course, it will be set up through a broker, through a custodian. So that way they're essentially like the bank that holds the money. So you may want to look into that, and you'll get more information once you apply, and let's see. Let's see. We have time for a few more questions. Okay, this is a good one. So someone asked about the 529 plans and different ways that you can use that 529 plan outside of qualified education expenses. So when you have a 529 plan, just like how that Trump account is going to roll over to an IRA when they turn 18, let's say you funded this 529 account specifically for education, and for some reason you don't use all that money for those education expenses. There are a couple ways that you can utilize this account. One, you can roll over up to $35,000 into a Roth IRA in the beneficiary's name if the account has been open for more than 15 years. So that might be something you want to look into. That can further, their goals for, especially if it's for retirement savings or the such. You can repay some student loans up to $10,000 maximum for federal private loans. You can also use those 529 accounts to reimburse yourself essentially for an amount equal to the scholarships, and you can do that tax-free. Let's see. Another good question was, we mentioned buying a home. How can we use a retirement account to buy maybe their first home? So typically when you take funds out of an IRA or a Roth IRA before the age of 59 and a half, well, let's stick with the IRA. If you take out funds from an IRA before the age of 59 and a half, there's typically a 10% early withdrawal penalty that applies. However, that penalty does get waived for certain reasons, and one of them could be you could pull some money out penalty free for the first time for the purchase of a first home up to $10,000, and that's a lifetime maximum. So they can take up to $10,000 to purchase their first home. Now, if it's coming from an IRA, keep in mind that they will owe income taxes on that amount. If it's in the Roth IRA space, then it is possible that they don't have to pay the income taxes on that. And of course, there's rules and regulations to everything. So you want to make sure you review each detail in the fullest extent before you make any decisions or withdraw any funds from these accounts, just to be sure. let's
And I'll answer
see.
another question here, Savannah. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I'm not sure
Uh-huh.
if my Wi-Fi cut out or what it was, but it looks like I
Oh,
was
you're
frozen there for a
fine.
minute, but I'm back. So someone asked about employer contributions and if they're tax deductible. So yes, employer contributions are indeed tax deductible. Corporations are eligible to contribute up to $2,500 to their Trump account on behalf of their employees' children. All of these annual contributions are indeed tax deductible from the employer's earnings. Great question.
Yeah, and just to add, we've been seeing research where over $500,000, 500,000 employers have already set up this program within their company. So you may want to speak with your employer and see if this is something that they're exploring, or maybe they've already established. So there might be a unique opportunity for you there.
And we did look into it as well. Employers, they can choose to contribute to the Trump accounts for their workers or workers' children. There's something called a cafeteria plan, or it's better known as the Section 125 plan, actually. It's basically an employer-sponsored benefits program that allows their employees to select from a menu of either non-taxable or taxable benefits. This is really nice because it can be customized or tailored towards each individual's needs. So contributions to a Trump account could actually be one of them.
All right. Do we have any more questions? If for some reason we don't get to your questions today, we can, of course, always reach out to you individually, or you can schedule a time to speak with us one-on-one, using the QR code on the screen. All right.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Take care.